The yeas are 229, the nays are 198, present is 1. Article 2 is adopted.
In December 2019, President Trump was impeached.
They're pursuing an illegal, invalid, and unconstitutional impeachment.
They have rendered the Constitution of the United States and its words meaningless.
On the one hand, some Republicans say this whole process has been unconstitutional.
The Democratic leader wants to write a completely new set of rules for President Trump.
But on the other, the Democrats say President Trump's actions meet the threshold for impeachment.
We have confidence in our case that it is impeachable and this president is impeached for life.
So, what does the Constitution actually say about all of this? I went to Philadelphia, the birthplace of the Constitution, for some answers from the Founding Fathers themselves. What does the Constitution actually say about impeachment?
The Constitution doesn't say too much about impeachment, but what it says is really important. First, it says that the House has sole power over impeachment and the Senate sole power over impeachment trials. And that means that whatever the House and the Senate say goes, and the courts are not going to second guess it. The Constitution also says that people can be impeached for treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. And of course, the question of what that means is hotly contested.
Okay, so the Constitution doesn't say much about impeachment at all. And the little information we do have is causing a lot of confusion today. So why include it in the first place?
The Founding Fathers were concerned not to have tyrants ruling America. And they had before them the model of King George, who had threatened their liberties. We know about Alexander Hamilton and his famous defense in Federalist 65 about the importance of impeachment for political crimes, crimes against the state. We know that James Madison, the main framer of the Constitution, initially thought that maladministration was enough to impeach someone, in other words, doing a bad job. But there was pushback. The claim was then the president would serve at the pleasure of the Congress. So as a result, the language was refined. George Mason, who's standing behind us, he came from Virginia, and he was very keen on the idea that we must protect ourselves from foreign corruption, from a conniving president who would conspire with a foreign prince or potentate for personal gain. He was confident that impeachment would make that impossible.
What was the reasoning behind giving the authority to the House to impeach and giving the authority to the Senate to try? What were the framers of the Constitution thinking in doing that?
The House is the people's house. They're like a grand jury. They can decide that the president's committed an impeachable offense by a simple majority, but the Senate is the wise, thoughtful leaders who will set aside their partisan interests, deliberate on the basis of the public good, and that's why the standard for conviction is so high. A conviction has to be beyond reasonable doubt.
So now we have the basics of how the Founding Fathers thought about impeachment. Treason, bribery, and high crimes and misdemeanors, all impeachable offenses. But what exactly does that look like?
The Founding Fathers didn't define high crimes and misdemeanors with precision, but they seemed to believe that not every impeachable offense was a legal crime, and not every legal crime was an impeachable offense. The best definition comes from Federalist 65, where Hamilton says, by its nature, impeachable offenses are political crimes, that is, crimes committed against the public interest.
And of course, there is one thing the Founding Fathers didn't take into account that's having a huge impact on impeachment proceedings today.
The framers of the Constitution had one big blind spot that they didn't anticipate, and that was the rise of political parties.
When you think about the relationship currently between House Speaker Pelosi and Mitch McConnell, what do you think the founders would have said?
James Madison considered parties a form of faction, and impeachment along purely party lines wasn't something they were contemplating.
The founders might not have considered partisanship, but there is some precedent for it. President Trump joins just two other presidents in being impeached, Andrew Johnson and Bill Clinton. What have we learned about the Constitution through those impeachment proceedings?
The central thing we learned is that the Constitution sets a very high bar for impeachment. Both the Johnson and Clinton impeachments failed. So that tells us that it's really tough to impeach a president, and that ordinary political disagreements should not be the basis for impeachments, even when they're presented as technical violations of the law. That's not enough. You need something higher to be a high crime.
So back to the ultimate question. Was President Trump's impeachment constitutional?
It's hard to imagine an unconstitutional impeachment because an impeachment itself is set out in the Constitution, and the House and the Senate themselves have the power to decide what the Constitution requires. So for better or for worse, our fate is entirely in the hands of the House and Senate. It's ultimately going to be politics which will decide.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.